بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear brothers, dear sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our Islamic Center of Sira tonight, while we have a special guest, Ustaz Ekram Haque. Welcome, Sheikh, inshallah. Ahlan wa sahlan bikum. He's coming all the way from Plano, Texas, which is my previous community. For 16 years, we've been talking about that, and the masjid, and our memory there. Welcome, Ustaz Ekram. Inshallah, tonight, Ustaz Ekram will talk about a special subject, which is about one of the most beloved messenger in Islam, Prophet Jesus. And he is one of the five of the messengers of power, Ulil Azm min al-Rusul. Quran al-Karim mentioned him more than 25 times, and we admire him so much, we love him so much as Muslims. And part of our Islam, and our Iman, and our Creed, Aqidah, to believe in him as a messenger. And also, like Sayyidina Musa, like what the Quran said, وَبَشَّرًا بِرَسُولٍ يَأْتِي مِن بَعْدِهِ اسْمُهُ أَحْمَدُ. فإنشاءالله أستاذ إكرام كم أستاذنا إن شاء الله هو give you the microphone for you إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير. تفضل.
جزاك الله خير.
وإياكم بارك الله فيكم إن شاء الله.
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Sorry to start this lecture a little bit later than I had anticipated, but inshallah it will be of benefit to you and to me, and also hopefully as it winds down, more people will join, inshallah. How many of you attended the Jumaa khutbah here in this masjid? Raise your hand. Two, and sisters. Okay. So I will quickly go over the subject of the Jumaa khutbah so that you can relate to the topic of tonight. So the khutbah was why Muslims love Jesus alayhi salam. And I gave a number of examples that the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ speak very highly of Isa alayhi salam and Maryam alayhi salam. So, for example, the Quran talks about Isa alayhi salam as wajih fi dunya wal akhirah wa min al-muqarrabin. So he is honored in dunya and akhirah, and he is on the day of judgment close to those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the Christian tradition, we find that they say that Jesus will be sitting on the right hand of God. And they have some other ideas, but nevertheless, we find many similarities also. Jesus alayhi salam was a Palestinian Jew. We should call him a Jew, but just so that you understand his social and historical background. He was a Muslim. All the prophets of Allah are Muslims. They submit to Allah, submit their will to the will of Allah. About Maryam alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya Maryam, inna Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wastafaki ala nisa'il alameen. O Mary, we have raised you and purified you and raised you above the women of the world. So Allah is praising Maryam alayhi salam. And the Prophet himself said that there are 4 women, among men there are many, but there are 4 women who have perfected their faith. And among them is Maryam alayhi salam, and then there is Asya radiallahu anha, and there is Fatima radiallahu anha, and such, and Khadija radiallahu anha. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises both Maryam alayhi salam and also Isa alayhi salam. The Prophet said, in dunya and akhirah, I am closest to Jesus son of Mary. And when Isa was leaving this world, as the Shaykh just recited in the ayah, he said, after me, there will be a messenger whose name will be Ahmed. And he told his disciples that I have many things to say unto you, but you will not be able to understand them. How it be that the Spirit of the truth come and guide you to all the truth. He will speak only what God inspires him to speak. And he is talking about our Prophet ﷺ. And the Quran tells us, الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ. Allah gives so many signs of the Prophet ﷺ in previous scriptures that they will recognize him, the Prophet ﷺ, as they recognize their own children. So, these are some of the background of Isa al-Islam, and many Muslims name their sons Isa and daughters Maryam. It is because of this respect and honor for them. In the Quran also, besides وَأُمُّهُ صِدِّيقَةٌ, the Quran says his mother was a woman of truth, a woman of chaste character. When some people try to slander the honor of Maryam because she had conceived a child without being married, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came to the defense of Maryam, calling it Buhtanan Azima, using the same terminology almost that Allah had used to defend the honor of our mother Aisha in the story of Ifk, Surah Nur, Hada Buhtanan Azim. So these are some examples. The Prophet ﷺ, when he is making the journey from Isra to Jerusalem, Jibreel al-Islam had him disembark from Buraq and pray to Raqqa in Bethlehem, the place Isa al-Islam was born. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes to Mi'raj and he meets Isa al-Islam in the second heaven, along with John the Baptist, Yahya al-Islam. And he comes down and he tells the Sahaba that Isa looks like Urwa ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. Urwa had not become a Muslim yet, but the Prophet ﷺ said that this is how Jesus looks like. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that I swear by the one in whose hand my life is, that Isa ibn Maryam will come back to the earth but before the end of time, close to the end of time, and he will come as a just ruler, and he will establish a rule based on justice and love, and it will be a time of extraordinary prosperity. And those who live in this time, they are blessed. They are going to be blessed. And as we know, we also have many hadiths talking about Masih al-Dajjal and how he will have appeared before Isa comes. And this was, the Christians believe that this is Armageddon. This is the final battle between Haqq and Batil. And Muslims will be with Isa. Muslims will be with Isa, and Isa will teach the Christians that Muslims are on the truth. The Quran is the truth. And what the Quran said about me, that I am a messenger of God, that is the truth, I am no son of God. So he will rectify the Christian beliefs when he comes back to earth. Unfortunately, despite the fact that Christians and Muslims make up more than half the world's population today, we do not know enough about each other. Especially Christians have no idea, most Christians have no idea that Jesus and Mary are some of the most respected and towering figures in Islam. A surah is named after Maryam al-Islam, whereas there is no surah named in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, and after Maryam al-Islam. But there is a surah in the Quran, and then you have Surah Yusuf, you have Ali Imran, and there are a number of other surah that are named after the family, the ancestors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ibrahim, etc. So, this is the gist of what I talked about in the khutbah today. And inshallah, I think khutbah has been recorded, so it should be available for you who want to watch for more detail. But tonight's talk is, who was the historical Jesus, alayhi salam? What do the Christians believe about Jesus and why? And what do the Muslims believe about Jesus and why? So for the last 2,000 years, what the Christians believe about Christianity comes to them mainly, almost exclusively, from these 4 books: Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Gospel according to Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Some say that Matthew was the first gospel, but now the modern research, biblical scholars say that it is actually Mark, the Gospel of Mark, from which Luke and Matthew have heavily borrowed, word for word, phrases and verses. So Christians believed in this case closed. They did not question what was in the Bible, and they thought that this is the inerrant, inspired Word of God in totality. But in the last 200 years, especially led by German Christian scholars, they have begun to critically examine the Gospels and to see what they can critically and historically establish about the truth of what the Christians believe. And these are Christian scholars. So they came to the conclusion that some stories about Jesus are verifiable through historical critical analysis, and others are probable, improbable, impossible, or unknowable. You can never know about those things. So what they generally believe is that Jesus was born to Mary in Bethlehem, in the town called Bethlehem, and he spent most of his life in Nazareth. So he was born in Bethlehem, spent most of his life in Nazareth. In the last week of his life, up until that point, he came to Jerusalem and had a problem with the temple, the high of the Jewish priests in the temple in Jerusalem. They also say that King Herod was planning to kill anyone who met the description of the background of Isa Islam, because he had been told, just like Pharaoh had been told about Musa Islam, some people had told him, Herod, that this child will destroy you. So Mary and her husband, by the way, the Quran doesn't tell us if Mary ever married. We don't know about that. But in the Christian tradition, she was married to Joseph the carpenter. So they took Jesus to Egypt, and he lived there for a few years or a few months. And when the threat of assassination went away, then they brought baby Jesus back to Palestine. But then instead of going to Bethlehem, they started living in Nazareth. Now the 4 Gospels, and I'll be talking more about them, they differ. So if you take the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, and read them side by side, which is called horizontal reading, and you read about the same incident, you will find that the Gospels differ with each other in important ways, sometimes contradicting each other. In a famous book called The Quest of the Historical Jesus, Albert Schweitzer, he says there is nothing more negative than the result of the critical study of the life of Jesus. So what happened when Christian biblical scholars started to take a deep dive into the first century Palestine to find out who exactly Jesus was and what exactly did he preach, they came back with very little information, and they were completely disappointed. Later on, in the 1980s, mid-1980s, for 20 years, 50 Christian scholars got together, some of the most eminent scholars of Christianity. They got together, and this debate was called the Jesus Seminar. You can find a lot of information online. And after back and forth deliberations, they came up with 2 publications. The 5 Gospels, not 4 Gospels, but the 5 Gospels. And another book called before Christianity. So they are saying that after Jesus, there was no Christianity. There was a period of time, there was no such thing as Christianity, but then Christianity came after Jesus and before Christianity. And they included the fifth gospel, the gospel of Thomas. So Christians today, all of these churches, believe in 4 gospels. But this group of 50 scholars, they included the fifth gospel, the gospel of Thomas, because they said the gospel of Thomas has more historically accurate information about Jesus than the gospel of John, which is the last gospel. So if we go by history, Jesus was an Israelite. He was from Bani Israel. He is the last of the Israelite prophet who practiced and preached the Torah and the Gospels. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Allah gave him Torah and He gave him Injil. He taught him Torah and He gave him Injil. He inherited the Torah from Musa alayhi salam, and he was given something fresh, something overriding the Torah. That's why the Christians say that Jesus did not always agree with the Torah, because Jesus said something about Sabbath, for example, and He did so, that Muslims, I believe, is because He told, the Quran tells us that, tell them, O Isa, that one of the reasons for my coming is that I made you halal some of the things that Allah had made haram for you. So Isa alayhi salam comes as a mercy to Bani Israel, because Allah, for punishment for this rebellion against Allah, had, in food, Allah had prohibited certain kinds of meat, etc., etc. So Isa alayhi salam has Injil also, and he is judging by both of them, and then he has taught hikmah. Now, in the terms of Islamic theology, the word hikmah in many of the Quranic verses means the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Isa alayhi salam is Jesus became divine when He rose from the dead. So He was crucified according to their beliefs. Muslims don't believe in crucifixion. Just to be clear, we are on the same page. So He was crucified on a Friday, and 3 days later on Sunday, He rose from the dead. That's when He became divine. He became God. This is Paul, and he is the earliest writer of the Gospel. His letters, some of his letters are included in the Gospels. The next version came that no, Jesus became divine when He was baptized by whom? By John the Baptist, Yahya alayhi salam. Another school comes in Christianity which says no. Jesus became divine when Mary conceived Him. When Jibreel alayhi salam came and blew into her, and she became pregnant with Jesus. That's when a flock of birds, dove came, and God chose Him as divine, made Him divine. And the fourth version is John's, which says that Jesus was always divine. He was co-equal, eternally co-equal with God from the essence of God. So, one of the Christian priests from North Africa, Arius, he disagreed with some of the Christian fathers, and he said, no, there was a time that Jesus did not exist, and He was created. From that point onwards, He was in existence, and He doesn't have the same power as God Almighty or the Father. So they cast Him out, and He was hunted down. His teachings were banned. And Jesus of Islam, the Quran does not give us a very specific place of Isa alayhi salam's birth. The Quran says that Maryam alayhi salam, when she became pregnant, she went to a place in the east, Makan al-Sharqiyya, and there she gave birth, and we have the details of her birth. The Quran mentions the miracles of Isa alayhi salam, and the Quran also mentions Isa alayhi salam by name, Isa Masih ibn Maryam, or sometimes indirectly, without naming Him, but we know from the context that He is being mentioned. This information includes his family, particularly his mother, his birth, his mission, his disciples, his struggles, and his attempted crucifixion, and in direct reference to his second coming. Some of this information is cryptic, that the Quran says that when he will be, all of the people of the book will believe in him before they die, and he will come at the end of the time. So, in Hadith literature, we find information about the special status of Isa alayhi salam at birth. So he was not touched by shaitan. Prophet ﷺ said that every child who is born cries because of the touch of shaitan, except Maryam and Isa alayhi salam. We also find in the Hadith literature his physical features. At the end of time, he will come down on the wings of the angels, on the white minaret of a masjid on the eastern side of Damascus. Some say this is Masjid Umawi, and some say this is another masjid. However, then the Prophet ﷺ said that he would be wearing saffron clothes, and you will see that the droplets of water, as if he had just taken a shower, are ready to drop from his ears, and his hair will be long and parted and thrown back. So the Prophet ﷺ provides us a lot more information, and then of course he met him in Mi'raj. Something interesting and very puzzling, that Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Most Christians, the majority of Christians. And he used to debate with the rabbis in his childhood, and they would be dumbfounded to see how knowledgeable Jesus was about the Torah. Of course, Allah had taught him the Torah. Yet, Isa alayhi salam was missing for a long time, and nobody knew where he went. So, who can tell us how long Isa alayhi salam remained on earth until Allah recalled him? How long? What do we know about it? No? Close. So, Isa alayhi salam was on the earth for 32 or 33 years. And he started his ministry when he was about 29. So his ministry was actually 31. Because his ministry, according to most accounts, lasted for 2 years. Very short-lived ministry. So out of 33 years, he was missing for 19 years. 19 years. 18 years. 18 years. From age 12 until age 29. The Gospels do not tell us anything where Isa was. The only thing they say that during this time, Jesus grew in stature and knowledge and wisdom with God. But where he was, nobody knows. Now, that has given to a lot of speculation. People have speculated where he was. There is one theory is that he ended up in India, and he was learning from the Indian sages. One group said that he actually went as far north as Tibet, which is now controlled by China, and then he eventually returned to Nazareth and eventually to Jerusalem. But we don't have any such information in the Quran to speculate. What was the religion of Isa alayhi salam? And the answer is Islam. He was sent by Israel, but all the prophets of Allah were Muslims because they submitted their will to the will of God. And they said, when I am a Muslim, all the time they talk about that we are the first among the believers. They submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By the way, Isa alayhi salam's religion was that somebody came and asked him, oh Master, what is the greatest commandment? And he said that your Lord is one, and worship him, one God. And this is the first of the 10 commandments that Musa alayhi salam was given. This is the first of the 10 commandments. Your Lord, your God is one. And the second commandment is that you love your neighbor as yourself. Right? And you find the similarity. Quran came, the Prophet ﷺ said Allah is indivisibly, uniquely one. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه وقال للجار ما يحب لنفسه. None of you will have the excellence of Iman until you love your brother and sister and your neighbor the way you love yourself. So Isa told them to love God with all your heart and worship God alone. But Jesus is Muslim. Of course, we believe that Jesus was a Muslim. Because all the prophets of Allah were Muslims. There is a Christian scholar named Robert Sherrington. He's a professor of Christianity at Luther College in Iowa. So he has written a book, Was Jesus a Muslim? Very provocative title. And he answers in the book, and I quoted him in my book also. He answers in the book that based on the historical information provided in the Quran about Jesus, he was a Muslim. So he's more reliant on the information about Jesus, historical information about Jesus in the Quran than in the Gospel. Did Jesus come to start a new religion? Because Christianity is the largest organized religion in the world today, and has been for many centuries. Correct? Christianity is the largest religion. Numbers wise, Muslims are the second largest, and we are catching up slowly. But we came almost 6 centuries later. Right? Did Jesus come to start this religion? And the answer is no. Jesus preached the Torah and the Gospels, the Injil, and they talked about worshipping one God. And he did not come as a universal messenger. He was sent specifically to Bani Israel. The Prophet ﷺ is the only universal messenger. I am sent as a messenger to all of you. Amen. So Isa came for them, and he did not come to start a new religion. But later on, the Greco-Roman followers of Jesus. So the Roman Empire controlled the first century Palestine. They had appointed a governor named Pontius Pilate. He was the governor of the Roman king. They controlled the Jewish life in Jerusalem, the first century Jerusalem. And Isa was part as a subject of this empire. But the Christians, for almost 200 years, they called themselves the party of the anointed, and anointed means the Messiah. The party of the anointed, disciples or the students of Christ, believers of the anointed, confidants of the anointed, friends of the anointed, sisters and brothers of the anointed, intimates of the anointed, the way, followers of the way, and the slave of God. These are the names by which the different Christian communities call themselves. They didn't call themselves Christian. So the word Christian or Christianity was not known for the first 200 years. But it is one of the most profound mysteries of history, I would say, not just our lives, but history, that Jesus, who came as the last of the Israelite prophet, in his name, people who came much later, they established a new religion and named it Christianity. This was not the intent of Allah's coming. So why Allah allowed this? Only He knows. Only Allah knows why He allowed this new religion to become so big and flash. Right? So therefore we can say, this is a very fine and deep point. Christianity is not the religion of Jesus. Christianity Christianity is not the religion of Jesus, it is a religion about Jesus. It's a religion about Jesus that some people have concocted. Did Jesus say he was God? And definitely he did not say that he was God. But once somebody came and he said, "Oh, good master," and Isa said, "Why do you call me God? Why do you call me good?" Good is, no one is good but God alone. This is Mark 10:18. One of the things that we understand is that Jesus lived in a time when Jerusalem and Palestine is controlled by pagan Romans. Romans are pagan, they worship your main idols, and so do the Greeks. They had common gods. So like, for example, Jupiter, Juno, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, Venus, Apollo, Diana, Minerva, Ceres, Vulcan, and Vesta, all these gods and goddesses, both the Romans and the Greeks believed in. And they had a very strong impact on the early Christian community. As a matter of fact, even till today, the names of Gregorian months, January, February, March, April, and so on, and the days of the week are named after Greek and Roman gods and goddesses and planets. If you look at the origin of these things, so they're so heavily influenced the early Christian community, and that's how this belief about Jesus being God, part of the Trinity, etc., evolved over time. Also, we know that Jesus, he knelt and prostrated in prayer, which is demonstrating the highest submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you put your head down. And many times in the Gospel of Luke, Mark, Matthew, and John, all these four Gospels, it is mentioned that at the crack of dawn, before the Fajr prayer, he would separate from the disciples and go to the Mount Olives in Jerusalem, and he will pray. Who is he praying to? If he is God, why does he have to pray? Why does he have to pray? Also, one very interesting incident we find in the Gospels, that as he is ascending to the heavens, after his so-called resurrection, he's taking Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is the closest female disciple of Isa alayhi salam. Actually, there is a gospel named the Gospel of Mary. This is attributed to Mary Magdalene. Some think that Mary Magdalene was actually, some historians, Quran provides any clue. Some historians say that Mary Magdalene was actually the wife of Jesus and he had a child from her. Anyway, as he is ascending to heaven, he tells Mary, "Oh Mary, I am ascending to my Father, your Father. I am ascending to my God, your God." So he is attributing God as the Father of all of his creation, not just his Father. So he means not a biological relationship with God, but a metaphorical relationship. Right? Do you understand this point? Correct? It's a very deep theological point. And Bart Ehrman, who is a professor of Christianity at Chapel Hill University in North Carolina, he has written many books about Jesus alayhi salam. He said if Jesus really went around calling himself God, wouldn't the other Gospels at least mention the fact? So this high Christology about God, about Isa alayhi salam, is the hallmark of the Gospel of John, the last Gospel. The other three Gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, they do not explicitly mention Jesus as God. Did Jesus call God as the biological father? And the answer is no. When he called, just like in the other incident, I am ascending to my Father, your Father, Same way, Isa alayhi salam did not mean that God is his biological father. As a matter of fact, even before Isa alayhi salam, in the Old Testament, we find that it mentions, for you are our father. So this is Old Testament. For you are our father, where Abraham not to know us, nor Israel to acknowledge us, you, Lord, are our father. And when Isa alayhi salam came, in the Lord's Prayer, the Christians learn the Lord's Prayer today, and it begins with, when you pray, say, Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come. So all Christians are addressing God as Father. So it's not Jesus alone who is the Son of God, or whose Father is God. Also, Son of God. So long before Christians started attributing sonship to Isa alayhi salam, Son of God, to Isa alayhi salam, in the Old Testament, we find that there are references to other people as Son of God. So, for example, in the story of Exodus, does everybody know Exodus, what it means in the Old Testament? So Exodus is when Israel were freed from Pharaoh in Egypt. You have many surahs talking about that. That's what Exodus. Musa said, let my people go. And Allah drowned Pharaoh and his army. And they came to the Sinai desert in Egypt. This is Exodus. So in Exodus, it says, the Lord said, Israel is my son, my firstborn. My firstborn son. Then in Hosea 11:1, God said, out of Egypt I called my son. In Psalm, which is roughly referred to as Zabur, that was given to Dawud alayhi salam, 2:7, God says to David, you are my son, this day I have begotten you. This day I have begotten you. And this is a very critical phrase. Begotten means a physical relationship, that you are physically born of somebody. That's what begotten. And Christians say that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. But in Psalm we hear it says, you are my son, this day I have begotten you. Then several other versions say the same thing. Now, the Quran obviously does not have anything like this. Quran mentions him as Masih, Isa ibn Maryam, Messiah, son of Mary, and Rasul of Allah. O Bani Israel, Rasulullah ilayhi, I will send, O Bani Israel, to you as a messenger of Allah. Okay, I'm going to quickly move through this so that we have some Q&A time. Gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. These are the 4 books that the Christians believe in, and together they are called the Bible. Okay, these are the 4 books. There were many others that were not included in it, but they still historically are known to have existed. This book, these books, it is not something that Isa alayhi salam gave to his disciples, like the Prophet ﷺ had described the Kutab, writing down the versions that came down. Right? He would have many Sahaba who would write down the verses, he would dictate to them. So it is being preserved at the same time. And they are memorized also. No such thing with Isa alayhi salam. Most of his 12 original disciples are peasants, they are farmers from the town of Nazareth or in the district of Galilee. And they are illiterate people. They don't know how to read and write. So, his stories about Jesus circulated. And as these stories circulated, more and more things were added to those stories. Okay? And it got embellished and changed. And someone decided to collect these stories about Jesus and put them into the form of a book. So actually it became 4 books. Gospel according to Mark, Gospel according to Matthew, Gospel according to Luke, Gospel according to John. Now even then, for decades, no authorship has been assigned to these books. Nobody knows who wrote these books, these Gospels. Eventually, somebody decided to put these names. Mark, Matthew, Luke and John, 2 of them were supposed to be disciples of Isa alayhi salam. But the Christian scholars of today, Christian scholars, not Muslim scholars, but Christian biblical scholars, they say none of the Gospel writers were eyewitnesses to Jesus. They were not eyewitnesses to Jesus. And as you know, the Gospels, the Bible, was written in a language which Isa alayhi salam did not speak. The language of Isa alayhi salam was Aramaic, and the Gospels were written in Greek for the first time. And they were written from copies of copies of copies which were written with mistakes. And this is what the Christian scholars are telling us today. That faith is one thing, but historically this is what we find. That the Gospels went through evolution, a historical development. This is not something that Allah gave, Jesus alayhi salam gave his followers. Look, this is the book Allah has given you, and just preserve it. And as a matter of fact, they were so terrified by the Roman rule there that and the apocalyptic teaching that was coming, that is at the end of the world. Yahya alayhi salam is talking about the end of the world. Isa alayhi salam is talking about the end of the world. And some say that the disciples were more concerned about how they will end up when the world ends. They were not concerned about preserving this. And certainly Isa alayhi salam leaves the scene. So, as I was telling you, there are other Gospels that have not been included, that didn't make the cut of these 4. The Gospel of James, Judas, Thomas, this is the twin brother of Jesus, by the way, according to their understanding. The Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of secret Gospel of Mark. So there is a Gospel according to Mark, but there is a secret Gospel of Mark. Gospel of Marcion, Gospel of Basilius, Gospel of Matthias, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the female disciple of Sayexd that I talked about earlier. Gospel of Judas. This is so surprising. Judas, according to many Christians, what many Christians believe that Judas is the one who betrayed Jesus. The Roman army did not know who Jesus is, because Jesus didn't live in Jerusalem. The last week of his life he came to Jerusalem. So they don't know him physically. So they have to identify who Jesus is so that we can catch him. But Judas was one of the disciples of Isa alayhi salam. He said, I will do it. For 30 pieces of silver, he sold his soul. So he identified Jesus. There is a Gospel according to Judas, Gospel of Philip, Gospel of the 12 Apostles, Gospel of the Ebionites, Gospel of the Nazarenes, and the Gospel of John. Subhanallah, in Egypt, in a place called Mali, in Egypt, in 1940s, some documents, ancient documents, were found in a cave, and they dug it up, and it just stirred up the Christian community. These documents were from the 2nd century and 3rd century, which is before the conference of Nicaea in 325, and it's still many of these things were not included in the Bible that we have today. The Jesus seminar that I talked about earlier in the 1980s, and the 50 scholars of Christianity who got together, they said that 82% of these statements in the Gospels that are attributed to Jesus, he never said that. 82%. These are Christian scholars. They are saying that Jesus did not say these things. These are not true. Historically, they cannot find it. They cannot verify this. The word Trinity, that God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost, this concept is not mentioned in the Bible, but it is derived meaning that other scholars have derived. The Western Church did not accept the doctrine of the Trinity until the 6th century, and the Catholic Church until the 11th century. And today, the Eastern churches still reject this doctrine of Trinity. They say this is a theological error. It is not correct, and they don't believe in it. And there are many other churches that don't believe in this. Was Jesus crucified? And of course, the Islamic answer is no. And we find from the Gospels different versions of the crucifixion of Jesus. And you say, okay, which one is true? In one version, Simon of Cyrene is made to carry the cross of Jesus, and in another version, John, it says Jesus himself carried his cross. So all these things. What does the Quran say? Quran says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. They didn't kill him nor crucify him, but it appeared so to them. And therefore, even Muslim scholars have come up with suppositions and theories, because shubbiha lahu means that it so appeared to them. It means that somebody was indeed crucified, but if it wasn't Jesus, who was it? And that gave birth to many theories. So one theory was that it was Simon of Cyrene who was carrying the cross of Jesus, and in the commotion that followed, the Roman soldiers crucified him. The other version is that it was Judas. Allah punished him for betraying Jesus. So he was given the appearance of Jesus, and the Romans caught him. Another version is that Jesus himself asked, who will stand with me for Allah? So they said, one young disciple said, I will. And so Allah gave him the appearance of Jesus, and he was crucified. I don't have much time because I know it's time for Isha. So I will stop here. By the way, not all Muslims believe in crucifixion of Isa alayhi salam. Among them are Presbyterians, Saint Barnabas, whose gospel we find is talking about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc. They say that this is forgery, this is not authentic, this is fake. However, the gospel of Saint Barnabas is also there, and it talks, pretty much what the Muslims believe about Isa alayhi salam. So I will stop here to allow some people to ask questions.
We can give like 5 minutes. It's okay.
5 minutes.
Anybody has any question? This 5 minutes regarding Jesus and.
I actually have a question.
Salam.
So one of the most important things for us as Muslims, dawah, right? Especially in the West, right? So the topic that you chose, subhanAllah, like in your opinion, how important it is to know the concept of what the Christians, how they believe in Jesus, because for us to explain to them, as far as the difference of opinion, what the Muslims think and what they think, is it important, or how important it is to know this as a Muslim? So when you do give dawah, that you are prepared for it.
So that's a very good question. So the first thing we should do is tell them the love and respect that we have for Jesus and his mother, Mary. Right? And so you set the tone for an open-minded dialogue, and you have put them at ease, because the way we love Jesus and Islam, no other community loves Jesus or his mother. So you talk to them about this. At the same time, Islam doesn't shy away from the truth. So theological differences that we have with them, even the Prophet ﷺ, think about this. A group from Najran came to meet the Prophet ﷺ in his masjid in Medina, and they had debated him about the reality of Jesus and reality of God, etc., etc. They agreed on something, and they disagreed with the Prophet ﷺ on other things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down verses to the Prophet ﷺ ordering him to make mubahala. Mubahala is when you come out, bring your family, and I bring my family, and we invoke Allah's curse on those who are lying about Allah. And the Christian derivation, some of them believed in the Prophet ﷺ, that he was the Prophet of Allah. They said, no, we are not going to do mubahala with the Prophet ﷺ. So we have our theological differences, but you also, if you point them to research that has been done in the last 200 years by Christian scholars of the Bible, then you don't have to say anything. These Christian scholars are doing your work for you. Because these Christian scholars are saying, like this Jesus seminar, that 82% of what is attributed to Jesus in the Bible, he never said that. As a matter of fact, some of the Bibles have red letters, meaning these are accurate statements of Jesus and Islam, and the rest of it is not. And you will see that the red letters are just a few here and there. So basically, I have the book actually, Why Muslims Love Jesus is Outside, along with the Seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Muhammad, son of Abraham, brother of Moses, successor of Jesus, and then a book on the spiritual hearts that think, see, and remember, Quran and the secret of the spiritual heart. And then I have an Arabic book for those who are learning Arabic and are trying to learn the Quran, read the Quran correctly. Those 4 books are available on the table outside. If you are interested, inshallah, stop by. If you have any questions, further questions, inshallah, I'll be around to try to answer those questions, inshallah. I think it's time to Isha. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Thank you, Mr. Ekram, for this important information about the reality of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus alayhi salam. As we Muslims believe, he is a prophet, he's a messenger, we love him. He mentioned the Quran maybe 25 times. And his mother, Maryam, she has a chapter in the heart of the Quran. And he came to Bani Israel as a messenger. And this is what Muslims believe. Inshallah, Brother Ekram will be here tomorrow from 11 to 12. If you need more information, more questions, inshallah, join, inshallah, to learn more about Jesus, inshallah, Rabbil Alameen. And we have to know that we love him. It's part of our creed. We believe in him as a messenger. We love him also. He's not a God or son of God, or who deny this Trinity, whatever they believe. With respect, lakum dinukum waliya deen. We're not fighting with anybody, but just we're trying to declare the truth. That's all, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll barakallah fikum. We need somebody to make azan, inshallah. Yalla, Yalla.